Have you ever wondered what's actually going on in your brain when you're trying to learn something new? Well, it turns out scientists have a way to draw a map of that very journey. So let's dive into the absolutely fascinating world of learning curves.
So just think about it for a second. The last time you tried to pick up a new skill, maybe a language, or a musical instrument, anything, what did your progress really truly look like if you drew it on a chart? Was it just a simple, straight line pointing up?
I think most of us hope for that steady, predictable climb. But the reality, as researchers are discovering, is almost always something way more interesting. It's a complex, winding path, full of unexpected dips, long, flat plateaus, and sudden breakthroughs. Okay, so if learning is this winding path, how do we even begin to make sense of it? Well, first we've got to understand the map itself. Let's talk about the basic shape of learning.
And that map, that's what we call a learning curve. At its core, it's a really simple but incredibly powerful tool. It's just a graph that tracks how much better you get at something the more time and practice you put in. It's basically the visual story of your journey from novice to expert.
Now here's where it gets really cool. Scientists take this simple map and they turn it into a kind of high-stakes test track for their most complex ideas about how the human mind actually works.
You see, scientists build these amazing computer models. You can think of them like mini brains to test out their theories about learning. And the learning curve? That's the ultimate reality check. If the computer model's learning curve doesn't match a real human's, well, then the theory behind that model isn't true.
And this test is incredibly strict. A model doesn't just have to predict that we get better, it has to predict the exact shape of our improvement and the exact rate of our learning. For example, an early model called the EBRW predicted this really clean, consistent learning rate. Let's just call it a perfect 1. Sounds great, right? The only problem was when they looked at real people, nobody learns like that. It was too neat, too perfect for our messy human brains. So it was back to the drawing board.
But here's the twist. For years, this whole process hit a massive roadblock. And it turns out, the very data scientists were using was hiding a huge secret, one that was leading everyone down the wrong path.
The problem wasn't always in the theories or the models. It was in the data itself, or rather, how they were looking at it. By taking everybody's results and just averaging them together, scientists were accidentally creating a total illusion, something called an averaging artifact.
And this quote from the research just nails it perfectly. When you average a bunch of individual learning curves, you can literally transform what they seem to look like. You create this picture of learning that isn't actually true for any single person in the group.
Let's make this crystal clear. Imagine person A, person B, and person C all of a sudden, aha moment. A light bulb goes off and their skill just jumps up instantly. But if you take those 3 sharp, sudden jumps and you average them out on a graph, you get this smooth, gradual curve. A curve that suggests slow and steady progress. It's a total phantom. The average curve was a myth.
So, the big breakthrough was realizing this. To truly understand learning, you have to stop looking at the blurry average of the crowd and start zooming in on the sharp, clear picture of each individual person.
And to do that, they needed way smarter statistical tools. Things with fancy names like hierarchical models or Bayesian frameworks. All you need to know is that these clever methods let researchers analyze each person's journey on its own terms, without mushing everything into a fake average.
And with these new tools in hand, wow, the true picture of learning finally snapped into focus. It wasn't one predictable, smooth line. It was a beautiful, chaotic collection of unique stories, each one messy, personal, and absolutely fascinating. All right, so we've got the right glasses on now. We're looking at individuals. So what are we actually seeing? What are the real patterns of learning that we're hiding in plain sight this whole time? Well, first, there's one you've definitely felt yourself. It's called the power law of practice. You know that feeling when you start something new, and at first you improve like crazy, but then progress slows way down. And it takes more and more work just to get a tiny bit better. Yep, that's the power law.
But then there's this other pattern that is just bizarre. It's called U-shaped learning. Your performance gets better, then it actually gets worse for a while before it finally starts to improve again. Now, this feels like you're failing, but it's actually an incredible sign. It means your brain is doing some major renovations, tearing down an old, inefficient system to build a much better one.
And this new, deeper understanding forces us to question all kinds of old assumptions, like take forgetting. When you feel like you've forgotten something, is that information really gone for good?
Incredibly, by looking at individual forgetting curves, not the average. The research now suggests that some of our memories might actually be permanent. Even something you studied only briefly could get locked away in your brain, essentially forever.
So this is all amazing science, but let's bring it back down to earth. What does mapping the mind in a lab actually mean for us, in the real world, in our own lives?
Well, it all comes back to that powerful scientific cycle. You build a theory, you test it with real data from individuals, and then you use those results to refine your theory and make it even better. It's this constant process of refinement that leads to huge breakthroughs.
And those breakthroughs are changing everything. We're talking about building AI tutors that can adapt to your personal learning style. We're talking about optimizing how we train pilots and surgeons. It even helps us develop better, more efficient ways to study for our own exams.
So, if there's one crucial thing to take away from all of this, it's that learning is not a factory assembly line. It is not one size fits all. It's a deeply personal, incredibly complex, and often wonderfully surprising journey for each and every one of us.
Which leaves us with one final big thought. We now have these amazing tools to draw a detailed map of how our minds learn. So the question is no longer just how we learn. The real question is, now that we can map the journey, how will we use that knowledge to change the destination?